The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello, friends. Thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week, we'll review Austin's 2-0 loss in the Leagues Cup to LAFC, and then we'll answer some listener questions and cover a few other pieces of Austin FC news. My name is Landon Cottom, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jeremiah Bentley. And Landon, I guess one bit of news that we'll tie into the story we're going to talk about is I have a birthday tomorrow. Well, I have a birthday today, I guess, when people listen to this. So kind of excited about that. So
Happy
what
birthday,
I treated
buddy.
myself to, thank you. And I went and treated myself to like a stupid expensive amount of vinyl because that's what I do now, even though it's often music I already own. I was just telling you before we started recording about this Beatles album that has like no content I don't already have, except for the album cover was a picture of the Beatles, which seemed kind of cool. So like, there's $50 I didn't really need to spend.
I guess you could frame it.
Yeah, that's probably the best use for it. Otherwise, I just listen to bits of other things. And then you mentioned to me that you had a little vinyl outing of yourself last night, which I think ties into this.
I did. It's like maybe the most like hipstery, pretentious thing I've ever done, but it was absolutely great, and I will absolutely do it again. Which went to a place. It's fairly new. I think it just opened this year, called the Equipment Room down on South Congress, and it's like a hi-fi stereo themed bar. And I think it's a Japanese concept of like these listening room cocktail bars where on any night you can I think you have to have reservations, but you can go in and they'll just have a DJ playing vinyls through like a super nice stereo system. And the whole room is kind of sound treated and meant to sound really, really nice. But we went to a special party that they had where everyone went in and listened to Kid A by Radiohead in its entirety. And so it's like this really nice cocktail bar and everyone's completely silent listening to a record together. Does that not sound like the most pretentious thing you've ever heard?
that I just want you to put so when you say in a room or bar, like how many people are sitting around silently listening to an album?
It's maybe like 30 or 40.
That's significant.
Yeah, but completely quiet. Nobody talking. You're drinking a nice cocktail and listening to Radiohead, and that's all that's happening. And it was fantastic. I loved it.
I'm so happy for you on that. And I also feel like the fact that it was Radiohead, it just adds to it being like the most pretentious experience a person could have. Like you weren't like listening to the Beastie Boys or whatever else. Like I guess Coldplay maybe would have been more pretentious. I'm not really sure, but like
Coldplay's more pretentious than
I don't
Radiohead?
know. Man, I checked that out for creep. I have no idea on Radiohead.
Kid A is definitely their most pretentious album.
I've heard that. Yes.
Do you have like fancy speakers and stuff, or like a tube amp or anything like that?
I'm not quite there yet, man. I bought like I bought a decent set off of Amazon. A lot of my records are like the stuff that my mom listened to in the early 70s, which is really cool. So like I've got my favorite thing I have is the Beatles White Album that my mom got when she was like 13, and it's
like original pressing.
Original pressing, like she's written her name on it so that nobody tries to steal it. So that's like a really cool. And then my son's like, well, this sounds terrible. I'm like, well, yeah, this is literally like a 60-year-old album or something at this point. Yeah. It's a lot of scratches and pops, but it's like super cool to have that version of it. So that's the best stuff I have. And then I get a lot of records at half price. And they have at half price books and records, they have like the little section, which is when you used to go to, we would like go like on a Friday night to Blockbuster and like go through the recently returned albums, and that's where all the good stuff was. It's the same. Like half price has a little section. It's like, here are the albums that we got today, and that's where you find all the good stuff. Because by the time they make it into the regular sorting, like people like me have gone in and bought all the things you would want.
Yeah, whenever you do start getting into buying like amps and speakers, I think that's where like the real money gets spent, which is insane. But I used to listen to Mark Maron's podcast pretty religiously, and he told this whole story about like buying this crazy expensive tube amp and these really nice speakers, and he was getting like radio frequency hum out of them. And one of the things that was suggested to him was essentially like build a Faraday cage around his office.
Oh my God.
So that's where you're headed next.
I'm not there yet. I don't think so. But it's been a really fun hobby to pick up. And there's just like that sound is super interesting. The other thing I found is like I get annoyed by how few songs are on a side sometimes when albums are long. So I've got some Black Crowes albums that are like 2 songs aside.
All right, I guess we should talk about soccer, Jeremiah.
Let's do it.
All right, let's get into the story of the week. Where should we start here?
Let's start. I feel like it's kind of like last week where it's been a little bit since the game actually happened. So I had to go back down memory lane a little bit to remember that one. So Austin loses 2-0 against LAFC, gets knocked out of League Cup. I think Austin is now 2 wins, 7 losses, and 1 draw against LAFC in the history of the competition, with those 2 wins both being in 2022, if I remember right. So there was the one in LA where we got that amazing Sebastian Driussi Rabona Diego for a goal, and the Ruben Gabrielsen goal. Then we got the game at home that we talked about last week as probably being the biggest win. This did not turn out to be that way at all. So we had a more predictable and routine outcome. I think the big story of the match from almost everybody is this change both in lineup and in strategy, and that being as opposed to what had worked against the teams from Mexico in the previous 2 matches. There's no real striker here. So I think like Sebastian Driussi coming out as effectively the number 9 is like the big story. And I think we have opinions on why it maybe worked or didn't, or maybe we have different opinions on whether it worked or didn't. So let's start there.
Yeah, so a lot of I think there was a lot of talk about not playing a striker and putting this lineup out. And for me, like when I saw this lineup come out, I was fine with it because I thought it signified that we were going to do one thing and we ended up doing a different thing. And so like I did not mind the lineup, but the lineup did not match the tactics we rolled out with. And so I think that is my biggest complaint. And like I don't know that either of them are mistakes in and of themselves, but they did not go together, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, let's get a little bit more into that. Like, unpack that a bit.
So, John Gallagher, I've said in the last several shows that if we're going to play like a tight defensive game and try to play on the counterattack, I like having him there. And especially if he ends up shifting back into kind of a wing back, which he kind of did at times in this game. We'll get into kind of the shape a bit later in the show. But in that setup where we're going to get him out in space, let him play on the break, that's where he's actually quite dangerous. I like him there. And so I saw that. I saw Driussi as the 9. This is kind of how we finished the games against the Mexican sides in Leagues Cup, where we'll pull Zardes at halftime, or I think 60 minutes in one of those games. They moved Driussi up high, brought Owen Wolf in, and had Owen and Danny kind of playing the like the counterattack starters, I guess. And then you had Gallagher streaking up the side, and he was offering options on that side. But we come out and we end up having a lot of the ball, which we did quite well. And I also don't think that all of the personnel matched that. And my main complaint here is John Gallagher on the wing if we're playing a possession game. I know most people were saying that Driussi as the striker was the biggest like kind of red flag in this one, but I'll get into reasons why I don't think that was as big of an issue. But like the second possession ticks over 51% for Austin FC, I want John Gallagher either off the field or playing fullback. I do not want him in the attack.
I think my biggest issue, and this is going to be like a vibes-based position on things, but like Jesse Zardes has been the best attacking player Austin has had in the month of July, both against the Mexican teams and against Charlotte. And just for him to not start and just play like a different style, a different strategy, just felt like Josh kind of overthinking the game and not going with what has worked before. And that was my biggest issue. And I was really annoyed by it early on. And then I kind of looked at the stats and I'm like, well, maybe I'm not right, but I still feel like ultimately at some point it felt like a momentum killing decision for me to change it up.
Yeah. One thing that I think we have to keep in mind is in order to play like a bunker and counter thing, the other team has to want the ball.
Totally.
And LAFC was very clearly not going to play that way. And so like that's where I'm like a little softer on the decision to say, okay, we're going to try to actually play with the ball and win. And it like almost kind of worked. And so it's hard to say that he was wrong there. But again, if that's the way you're going to play, I think you want Zardes in there. I think you don't want Gallagher up front. Like that's where I'm at. Like if you're going to choose to play that way, put the players in to play that way. And I don't think this was the best setup for it.
Yeah, and then you mentioned possession. So I thought this is this is going to be the second time we've done a tweet or an article from Armin Kafai in the opening, but he brings up, he said, and I'm curious about your take on this. It was a tweet from August 7th, which I feel like was related to the Austin game in some way. Will we ever get to the point where we just take possession as a style of play metric and not a stat that's associated with winning or losing? It's like, what do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think there's been a lot of people beating that drum for years now. And I think we've done it on this show, right? Like, possession is not a thing that, in like, it's also so contextual that, like, again, like I keep hearing Austin FC fans say that, oh, in the games we had more possession, we lost. And it's like, well, we had most of that possession after we were down 2 goals. And so,
and then we were chasing the game, right? And the other team was letting us have the ball. Yeah.
And so it's like, by ignoring that, you are making the stat meaningless. It is not 100% meaningless, but as Armand says, like, it is associated with the style of play you're on, or in the cases we're referencing, like it's like an effect of the game state as opposed to like what was good or what was bad. And so people put way too much stock in that overall number. The same when we talked about XG last week, like the number at the end of the game is far less important than when it happened and how it happened.
Yeah, we had a little bit of example of that too. Like I think in this game, the XG was relatively balanced, and this is going to go back to the last time we talked about last week when we talked about this. It's like Austin took a lot of shots. Austin took more shots. Austin's shots were not very high quality, other than we'll get like 1 or 2 we'll get into. But we were looking at this chart. There's not a ton of data for Leagues Cup that you can look at, but we found one, and it was very clear Austin. This goes back to what you're talking about. Like Austin was getting a lot of shots and a lot of chances, but they were all kind of weak chances in the final third. They're all kind of from around the outside of the box, like some inside, some out. There was a lot of quality chances, whereas LAFC, with the way they play, obviously enhances this, but they had fewer shots. But like the ones they were doing were much more likely to go in.
Yeah, for sure. And like they essentially did to us what we did to Monterrey. And I'll say like some of Austin's chances were like, yeah, LAFC did a good job of limiting us to bad shots. And then we also punished ourselves by making poor decisions at times. And we'll get into Bukhari takes a shot at one point that he has no business taking. There's 6 guys in the box, cross it. and so there's like some moments like that too, where like my biggest takeaway at the end of this game was that, like, I'm not saying this is the only thing that matters, but the biggest thing that I came away with was we need a real striker on this team, because we're talking about Gyasi Zardes. Like, Gyasi Zardes is who we're complaining about here. The guy who we've whined about for 2 years and who
right.
didn't score a goal for a year is who we're saying was supposed to save this game for us. Like, that's a problem. Like, we need to have someone better than that if we're going to be a competitive team. And I'm not saying that to wipe away any of the issues with the plan in this game, but it is still true. Like, we have to step up a few positions, and some of these low quality chances become high quality chances when you play
with
a
high
game
quality
like this.
Striker. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is something that will come up just from reading the outline. I think at least twice we'll talk about this position and where it may go. So I think you want to take a break now and then sort of get into the details of the match.
So before we take a break, I wanted to let's end on a positive note, because I don't like overall. This was like actually mostly a pretty good game from Austin FC. And one thing I really loved seeing was kind of the fluidity of movement within the team. And we kind of hypothesized as Biru was signed, as the Dessler rumors started coming up, that maybe this is the beginning of the Manchester City-fication of Austin FC. And as Biru came in, we didn't quite see that yet. And then the first couple of games with Dessler were just kind of completely different animals. But in this game, we have Guilherme Biru playing as a midfielder for big chunks of the game. As balls are coming into the box, like he's making the near post striker run at certain moments. And then like they're just the rotation between players, the pass and move freedom that they all had and like looked quite comfortable doing is a thing that we've never seen from this team. And I like in a team that has just been so predictable in the way that they play so often. The only predictable thing about big chunks of this game was that when we got into the final third, we couldn't finish anything or like create a proper shot. But there was so much good happening in certain parts of the field and certain parts of the game. And I feel like it happened for pretty big parts of the game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I guess we have been kind of harsh in this opening segment. And this is one thing I was going to say about the shot charts, and I kind of forgot, is to your point, what you just said is like everything leading up to those opportunities was pretty strong, right? And they just made the wrong decision, or like the ball bounced the wrong way or whatever. Like there's a lot to build on out of this match, despite the fact that it's like another LAFC loss on the road, which I think is the thing that annoys me at the base of it. But it's not to say there's not good things that can be taken out of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and talk about the rest of the game. When no one is around. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FEF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment, which you can check out wherever you get your podcasts.
You can go to FEF.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FEF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders or parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community.
Amplify has been the home of fee-free banking since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees or minimum balances. That means Amplify's fee-free checking accounts can help you get more mileage from your everyday spending.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more and to register for free parking at the Amplify Esperanza branch on game day, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower-soccer. All right, we are back. Jeremiah, we are once again talking about this game way too far after it happened. What were we talking about before this game?
I think one of the things we were talking about, well, there was a lot of irritation among the fan base about the format, right? And I feel after you pointed out last week that I think it was Weeby was arguing with every Austin fan about the league format. He dug in farther and argued with
doubled down.
Yeah. So I guess that was the big thing that I heard is like, and somebody had a chart that talked about, it feels like most of the first place teams in the groups ended up going on the road and almost all of them got knocked out. I don't know the specifics of it, but yeah, this is really common that MLS teams that won their group did not get rewarded going into the round of 32. We've touched on this, but like LAFC again, can we get something different in terms of who we're going to play against these kind of tournaments? And then just like how the momentum would carry forward, or if the momentum would carry forward at all, was another thing that we came into out of this. And I think going back and listening to last week, we probably didn't appreciate LAFC's style of play enough and thought that maybe Austin would have a chance to play the way they played against the Mexican teams. And that did not pay out just because of the way that LAFC lined up.
Yeah. And like, I think I was guilty of kind of conflating the LAFC teams of the past where they have been able to kind of dominate possession, but Cherundolo has not really played that way this year. He's early on in the season, like was being criticized for almost playing too much of a bunker and counter style. And as they've brought in new guys and gotten new guys more comfortable, they've kind of been a bit more flexible. But it was definitely the plan against us. And as we were able to keep the ball and move the ball on them, they leaned into it a bit more. And we'll get into the goals here, but that I think like it's exactly what they wanted to happen. And I think probably we're a little bit fortunate, but when you have Denny Bouanga, like sometimes there's a little bit of luck, but you also make your own luck by having a guy that talented on the field.
Yeah, man. I mean, he's kind of inevitable, you know. And I think I just saw I think he's like 8 goals scored in Leagues Cup so far. You know, he's just like a guy that rises to the occasion at every point in time. And we talked about Austin looking really good, but just every time LAFC advance the ball going forward, like you get nervous because you know what they can do. And Denny Bouanga did it.
Yeah. Let's go through this lineup. So we had Brad Stuber in goal, Biru, Hines-Ike, Hedges, and Dessler on the back line, Ring, Pereira, and Owen Wolf in the midfield, John Gallagher, Osman Bukhari on the wings, and then Sebastian Driussi playing the 9. This is, again, we've done this a lot over the years where this is what the graphic said at the beginning, but there was a lot of movement and fluidity within this shape here where John Gallagher was like, I was kind of skimming through bits of the game after I'd already rewatched it to try to figure out if John Gallagher was playing wingback or winger. And I still don't know. And it was not because he was like in the wrong spot or looked like he didn't know what he was doing. It was just that it was super fluid and just kind of depending on what LAFC were doing, he was doing something to match that. And so at times he would be in a back line of 5. At times he would be up in the press, kind of pressing along with the front 3 there. And so that was super flexible. We see, I mentioned a little bit in the first segment, Guilherme Biru playing as a midfielder for large chunks of the game. And like, it seemed like in certain phases of the buildup, that's what he was supposed to do. And there was, I kind of wanted to take a screen grab of this, but there was at one point where I think it was Owen Wolf and maybe Alex Ring or Danny Pereira were out wide, like on the touchline, and Biru and Dessler were playing as like central midfielders. And I love that. I think that's so much fun and can be super effective if you do it in an organized way. It was just, but it made it very difficult to kind of give a name to what they were doing.
Yeah, you think this is? You touch on this. You think this is is this the future for Austin, or more of these guys that kind of are positionally flexible that can play this way that you expect to see more of, or situational, or what? What do you think?
I don't know that it's going to be exactly this thing, but the flexibility is absolutely something I expect to see more of. It is like, I think it's a thing that Burrell is going to want. And so you can have a guy like Manchester City uses, where they have a center back step into midfield and play defensive midfield, or a fullback doing that same position. And then guys that can float in and out of different spots and kind of be as comfortable in one of those things. It's like the total football thing of like the Dutch in the 70s and then moving into like the Barcelona era, where they want every player on the field to be comfortable playing almost anywhere else on the field. And so I don't know it's going to be to what degree that will be true, but it's like the flexibility and like everybody being like a footballer, not just like a functional player in a position, but everybody being able to play with the ball, everyone being able to move and kind of float into different spots of the field to a certain degree. That is absolutely what Burrell's going to want.
Well, maybe let's get into some. We talked about the stats enough. Let's get into some of the game events. The first one being this Denny Bouanga goal, 11 minutes in.
Yeah, this starts with a kind of impotent Mikel Dessler shot or cross. I can't really tell what he was trying to do, but bounces straight into Lloris's hands, no trouble at all. We had to find out after the fact what actually happened, because the wonderful MLS broadcast insisted on showing us Will Ferrell instead of the soccer that was still happening on the field.
And I don't think it was just Will Ferrell. It was Will Ferrell talking to Olivier Giroud. All the Giroud FaceTime I mean, I'm in favor of that. Maybe this wasn't timed well, but like that was the moment.
They would have done it if it was just Will Ferrell. Am I wrong?
I think you may. I disagree. But I just every time Giroud's on my TV, I'm happy. So maybe that's just me.
That's fine. Just don't do it when there's soccer happening. This is
that's fair.
Like it's not every MLS broadcast. Some I think that they must have different producers that have kind of different styles. But when the ball is in play, like the ball did not go out of bounds, and they're showing, okay, yeah, Olivier Giroud, that's exciting. Maybe it warrants a couple of seconds. But when they're showing a static coach, not saying anything, not doing anything, they're just showing a coach's face while the ball is in play, or a person who's off the ball while the ball is in play. This is not like, watch any other broadcast in the world. Watch the NBC broadcast. Watch like the European broadcast. They do not do this. And I think it's like a thing that makes MLS look Mickey Mouse, in my opinion.
I do not disagree with you. And I'm the first time I watched this, I didn't even realize that we got a replay where we could actually see what happened. And I thought we just missed the entire action. So, thank God when we got the replay after the goal, like we actually got to see what went on, which is like basically a breakdown among the entire center back core for Austin FC.
I think mainly just one center back, really, because so Lloris catches it. He pretty quickly does like a sidewinder punt, just like a line drive down the field. Because when you have Bouanga out there, like, why not? Just try that. It's probably going to work at least a couple of times in the game. And Austin's in pretty good shape to cut it out. And Brendan Hines-Ike just kind of misreads the bounce. And he either needs to step up and just let it ricochet off him, like ahead of him into space, or start retreating where he can kind of cushion it down or play it back to Stuver. And he does neither of these things and just kind of gets caught in no man's land, bounces over his head. And Bouanga is just an absolute beast and just outruns everyone, gets the ball. Hines-Ike is on his back a little bit, but he's effectively 1v1 with Stuver, and Stuver gets a touch to it, but it's not enough to keep it out. And it's just super annoying because LAFC had not bothered us at that point. And it wasn't like this was just such a good play that there's nothing we could do about it. This was our own doing. Like, we shot ourselves in the foot by just misplaying a ball. I think Wolf in the post game tried to give Hines-Ike a little bit of cover by saying, like the pitch was bad, which the pitch was absolute dog shit. It sucked so much, but I don't know that it mattered in this particular instance. Like, Hines-Ike just whiffed it.
I was just going to ask you about that because I had written in the notes that the pitch was like kind of a mess, but I don't know that it really, a pitch like that is, both teams are playing on the same pitch. So like it provides the same advantage or disadvantage to others. So
I'd say it provides the advantage for the team who's playing bunker and counter as opposed to the team who's trying to play with the ball on the ground. Yeah. Because I did see some passes where it's like at Q2, you expect that the ball to be like rotating backwards the whole time and travel about 15 yards further, and it would just die. And like the Austin players had to get used to it. I'm not saying that that's why we lost, but it didn't help. And I also don't think it had an effect on this particular play.
Yeah, that's what I was going to go back to. Is like I saw that comment, and then when I went back today and watched the goal again, I was trying to like specifically watch for that, and I that was like a nice thing the coach tried to do, but I don't think it necessarily. I agree with you. I don't think it had an effect.
Austin gets one of their first decent chances around the 17th minute. It's a set play short corner. I know how you love those. And this one was actually kind of fun and actually worked until it didn't. But they like play it out to the top, and then Danny runs in behind and they chip the ball over, and he ends up in space, like on the edge of the outside of the 18-yard box. He tries to just kind of cross it into the 6, and it gets deflected out, falls to Ring in a pretty dangerous space. It would have been a tough shot just because of the traffic in the box, but he just skies it over and doesn't even get a chance. And so looking at like the XG map that you mentioned earlier, LAFC did a good job defending these moments, and we'll get into some other moments where I think that was also true. But Austin also just like either Alex Ring doing Alex Ring things, or people making poor decisions as to like which pass to pick out, or which way to go with an option there. I think we like kind of took some chances away from ourselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, well, let's go to maybe the best chance of the night. Just 15 minutes later, an Owen Wolf opportunity that he almost made a really, really good play on a ball and didn't, and forced a really strong save.
Yeah, so the camera at I forget what their field's called now. The camera at LAFC's field it's quite a bit further off the pitch than some fields have it, and so like the amount of skill involved in this opportunity, I thought it was Driussi that did it, and it ended up being Owen. But this one starts with Driussi dropping in deep and splitting lines to find Bukhari. He's kind of unable to control it, but it luckily falls right into Ring's feet. He picks it up and starts driving forward, plays Dessler wide right, who's making a run, and then we've got Owen and Biru in the box when Dessler's cross comes in. Biru is unable to get like good contact to call it a shot, but he keeps it alive and just kind of pops the ball back up into the air. And then Owen comes flying out of nowhere, volleys it out of the air with like an outside of the foot karate kick. And Lloris makes like a pretty good reaction save on it to keep it out. But yeah, really good bit of skill from Owen here. And then this is in like this and a couple of other chances throughout the rest of the first half are part of the reason why, like in hindsight, I'm a little less worked up about not having a striker here, because it wasn't like those spots weren't being occupied. As Driussi would drop back, like he did in this one, he drops back and receives the ball between lines to kind of help us play through pressure. And as he does that, other players are filling that gap. And so it would often be Gallagher would move inside, or Owen or Ring would push up and kind of fill that space. Or at sometimes Biru in this moment, like Biru ends up in the box, making a run in the box. And so I feel like the other players did a good job of rotating and filling that space. Would Zardes have maybe done better with some of these chances, or maybe had just like a little bit of deception or a little bit of movement to get into space? Probably yes. But also, if you don't like hit him in his forehead with the ball, like he's not going to get to a ball. So I think it's like a bit of a double-edged sword there. But I do think the players that were on the field, as far as movement and positioning, did quite a good job of kind of filling that space as Driussi would drift around.
Yeah, I think this was the best example of that for sure. And there aren't a lot of other great opportunities in the first half, but like I kind of like we talked about last week. You go into the half feeling like you're down 1-0, but feeling like I felt like the goal was a goal at least was going to come for Austin at some point, just with the way Austin was moving the ball and being dangerous, sort of the middle part of the field, like we talked about, like not in the final third. This did not seem like a game that was sort of out of reach. And then also, speaking of Zardes, you do see the opportunity that like there's going to be subs that come on that sort of change the way Austin plays, and maybe Zardes can get, on fresh legs, can get this goal that knots it up.
Yeah, there was one other decent chance in the first half where Ring plays between lines to find Bukhari at the top of the box, and he kind of like reverses out of pressure and then plays Driussi through to the end line. And he hits a ball just on the ground into the 6-yard box. And LAFC does a good job of kind of crowding that near post. But it was Biru making a near post run, like the run you would expect the striker to make. And then you had Gallagher crashing the back post, and then Owen kind of arriving late at the penalty spot. And there was a lot of traffic on the front post. But this is another one where I kind of think we like a little bit better vision or decision making maybe gives us a better chance. If he either tries a little cutback or chips it to the back post, Owen and Gallagher, neither of them have that much pressure on them. So not an easy take, but again, where just like a little bit better decision making maybe gets us that extra half chance that maybe would have gone in.
Is this the one that he hits in like into the side of the net, as opposed
to
something else?
That's a Bukhari one later. This one is
gotcha.
Yeah. This one is he's trying to play across into Biru, making that near post run, but I think it's Murillo or someone else slides in and just does really well to block that out. Yeah, so halftime comes. LAFC pulls off the teenager that was playing on the right wing for them and puts on Christian Oliveira. And then pretty much immediately, Austin puts a ball into the back of the net that gets called offside. So Brendan Hines-Ike plays a ball over the top to Bukhari, who's making like an out to in run behind the back line. And like that's we've never had a player even try that kind of run.
Yeah.
And the fact that he tried it and is just super fast, it was like a lot of fun to just see it almost kind of work. But he gets on the end of the ball, is able to hold it up and either lays it off or maybe like someone gets a touch on it, but the ball falls to Driussi at the top of the box. And Lloris, as the initial ball was coming in, he came off his line thinking he was going to have to deal with it. And so when it falls to Driussi, he's kind of in no man's land, and Driussi slots it past him and puts it in the net. But it immediately gets called offside. When you watch the replay, Bukhari goes just a half second too soon and is probably 2 yards offside.
Yeah, it was one of those. It was just like a timing thing, right? Like there was not a lot of controversy that he was offside, but you could see what he was trying to do, and where if he just held up for just a brief, like half second, like you said, it wouldn't have been offside, and maybe it would have been a goal. And as we know, goals change games.
Yeah, so let's go. Yeah, LAFC scores again in the 61st minute. Austin is able to kind of force a bad pass with their press and wins the ball. Then Ring plays just kind of a hopeful pass upfield. I'm not sure if he was trying to play to Bukhari's feet or trying to find Dessler, who was making a run, but it pretty much just goes straight to an LAFC player. I think Aaron Long wins it. So we're already pressing high. We have a lot of numbers forward. Dessler makes that run to open up for Ring. And then as we lose it, Long plays an immediate ball to Bouanga. He plays an immediate ball forward to Bogusz. And so we're in a really bad spot. As Bogusz kind of pushes forward, he's able to shake off a challenge from Brendan Hines-Ike and then drives back inside towards the box and then plays a through ball into the backside run of Christian Oliveira. And he takes a shot that, like, you would kind of think, like, you'd bet on Stuver to make that shot more times than not, probably, like to save that shot more times than not. But as Biru's sliding in, it deflects off of his leg and just pops over Stuver and gives him no chance at all. And so again, just like LAFC does really well in several moments here and then gets a little bit lucky on the end of it. But I want to focus on kind of two key moments earlier in this play where so Bouanga plays that pass to Bogusz and he continues his run kind of up the gut. And so as you watch that last ball through to Oliveira, both center backs are kind of having to stay central, because if Bouanga is about to receive a pass at the top of the box, like that's all hands on deck, right? Like everyone
Absolutely
go there. And when Bogusz plays it past him, Biru is just a little bit late and like unable to get into position to cut that pass off. And so the pass is really nice, the run is good, and we're not in the position to cut it out. And he gets into that spot. So lucky or no on the finish, like they did really well to get the ball into that position. But before that, Brendan Hines-Ike, like on that challenge with Bogusz, like he kind of goes in on a shoulder and spins out with the ball. I think Hines-Ike has to go into this challenge with the mentality that, like, I'm coming away with the ball or this is a foul. The half measure doesn't work. Like in that part of the field with those numbers against this opponent, take him out. And if you can win the ball, great. If you don't, put him on the ground and we'll deal with the free kick. But you can't, like, Matthias Bogusz and Denny Bouanga are like two of the best players in this exact scenario. Do not give them any chance to make something of it.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that at all. That's exactly what I thought when I was watching. Is like, this is the time for a professional foul. So I think it's time to maybe we just like cover Brendan Hines-Ike Ike's night a little bit. So he's a factor in both the goal, like a fairly significant factor in like both the goals. So it seems like he has this. Maybe this is why he was available, but he's like a very up and down kind of player, right? Like I feel like we've talked about how Brendan Hines-Ike in some matches is just like, you know, a nailed on like destroyer. And I feel like we've had plenty of discussions now, like especially after the first 4 or 5 starts he's had, where he's been kind of a liability. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I don't feel like he's even had just like many, if any, like all around bad games, but he's made some mistakes or like switched off at moments where it's been really consequential on those games. And so yeah, I'm not writing him off for calling his run of form earlier in the year a fluke, but it's like I'm less confident in him than I was a month or two ago for sure.
You feel like you're very ready for Svaktak to get here, get integrated into the team, and Hines-Ike to be one of your options off the bench, as opposed to like one of the people that the team is having to rely on the most in order to get a good result.
Yeah, which is true of many positions.
like a bunch of the players on this team, for sure.
Okay, I think the next big moment is substitutions. So we talked about early on where I think I was frustrated with Josh Wolf for different reasons than a lot of other people. This is one where I think I'm frustrated with him for the same reason as a lot of people, where he pulls Owen Wolf off and puts on Zardes, which I think is what should have happened, like getting him on the field, but pulling Owen Wolf off, like I thought Owen was quite good and that there were other people on the field that were much worse than him. And at first I was like, okay, like Owen's, maybe it's a minutes thing and they're trying to pull him off, but Owen didn't start either of the other Leagues Cup games, right? So he's not tired.
No, and then what did you think about he? I think he had the subs ready to come on earlier. Did he have subs ready to come on before the goal? And they decided
you can't
not to
see
just
it on the
because of the game
broadcast,
state?
but in the post game press conference, he said that they were ready to come on earlier, and then I think there was like a pretty long run of play where the ball didn't go out of bounds. So I'm not entirely sure when he actually had them ready, if it was before the goal or just after, and he had to wait until there was an actual break to put them on. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure when that series of events happened.
And regardless, it's still kind of more of the same. I mean, Austin has a little bit of a different shape, but and it continues to dominate possession.
Yeah,
Continues to
they
get
also
shots.
pulled Bukhari off for Obrian, and I think maybe this had something to do with pulling Owen off. Like I wanted them to take John Gallagher off, or at least move him further back on the field. But like, if you know Dessler's not going to go 90, then it probably is worth keeping Gallagher on just so you can shift him back to right back as you make that sub. And so you can make an attacking sub for Dessler and move Gallagher back. So I think that makes sense there. And then, yeah, they put Obrian on for Bukhari, but the rest of the game, like down 2-0, it kind of becomes tactics free zone where we're just throwing numbers forward and trying stuff, and most of it's not working. But I think it was also like a pretty strong reality check going from Dessler and Bukhari and Wolf and Biru kind of driving play to Obrian and Gallagher being like the wide players on either end and kind of being the place that attacks go to die.
That's fair. Well, I mean, honestly, the whole game was kind of a reality check on the talent gap between Los Angeles and Austin, too, ultimately. When Austin has a really good game, but just can't answer just the guys who make things happen in the moment. Like Austin still does not have that many season difference makers, and like hopefully Bukhari will become, that guy, but obviously short amount of time in the league, just playing a few matches, like he's not going to be now. And it's like there's hope for the future, but it's just, for me, the story on the night is just the talent gap is so evident.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, and then like at key positions, talking about the number 9, like that is a spot where it will make a huge difference if we can upgrade there. And then, yeah, the other one being like the Alex Ring paradox, right? Where he does so much good, but then is like not very often able to come up big in the moments that you really need a DP to come up big.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other individual players you want to highlight?
I think we've talked about everybody that sort of I have had any take on. If you have anybody you want to cover, or formation things you want to cover, I'm definitely interested in hearing it.
I just wanted to say, like, Bukhari, this was probably the most complete run out we've seen. Like the first game was his like his very first game was like a little bit rusty, still trying to figure things out. The second one was such a short run out. He didn't get to play in the third one. And so having him come in a bit more comfortable with what's going on around him, and to see him that he is a difference maker, just ball at his feet, 3 defenders looking at him, and somehow he ends up on the other side of him. Like, Austin has never, ever, ever had a player capable of that. And that is very exciting to me. Still needs to kind of build some chemistry. We kind of referenced a moment earlier in the game where he gets into a space like that and is at a really weird angle and has, I think, 4 guys in the box, including our 2 center backs. And he tries to lash in a shot at Hugo Lloris instead of playing like a much higher percentage crossover to the backside. And so some decision making, some like chemistry stuff, but as far as like the game changing talent, that was clearly there on the night, and I'm very excited to see more of that. And then Mikael Dessler was super good again too. So I think they can still probably improve their chemistry a little bit and learn to play with each other a bit more, but very obvious upgrades from what we had before.
Yeah, and I guess that's going to be it's definitely the theme of mine so far this year is for Rotos. Like, every player, this is still true, and don't know how many players exactly are at this point in time, but like every player that's come in is better than the player that they replaced, which leads to positive vibes for the future, even if they're not all being realized right now.
Yeah. Okay, should we take a break, Jeremiah, before we get on to the next segment?
Yeah, let's do that, and then we'll cover some other Austin FC news, and then we will answer some questions.
All right. Hang tight. We'll be right back.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. The Sage Wilson team is made up of Austin experts who are client-focused and have over 30 years of combined real estate experience. Our friends at Sage Wilson Realty are giving away 2 tickets to an upcoming match. Fill out the form and the show notes for your chance to win.
If you or someone you know are in need of Sage real estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Be sure to check them out online at sagewilson.com.
The premier sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is McGuire Woods Consulting, helping clients in the public affairs space from lobbying at the local, statewide, and federal levels to digital and communications campaigns across the country.
McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in 10 MLS cities and is proud to support Moon Tower Soccer and Austin FC in their march to the playoffs, which is, I think, the only competition that they've ever been in, right?
Yeah, there's nothing else that has ever gone on for Austin other than the march to the playoffs in 2022 and 2024.
Contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com for more information. All right, we are back. We're going to do some listener questions and get through as many of those as we can. But first, let's do a quick little news roundup here. So let's start with transfer window. We're recording this on Monday, August 12th. I believe the window is open through, I'm guessing, midnight Eastern time on Wednesday. Is that right?
Wednesday, yep. Wednesday, August 14th.
We got a little bit of teaser from Josh Wolf in a midweek press availability last week, I think, saying that like there might be a couple of new players coming in still, which is, I mean, if he's talking about it that openly, then how much hope should we have at this point?
I mean, that feels very right. I mean, that feels, knowing Josh Wolf and knowing, it feels like thing that may very well be reality, or it's not something he would be talking at all. Because a lot of times he just like defers that all off to Burrell, right? He's like, I don't know, this is not a me thing, this is a Rodolfo thing. But
right.
So I mean, but that may be like just enthusiastic fan fiction related to our needs to have a number 9. Is that maybe one will come in this summer and help save the season?
It is true that it's uncharacteristic of him to offer information like that so willy-nilly, though, right? Like, if he doesn't want to tell you something, he's not going to tell you something.
He just doesn't. You're right. Yeah, there's no hint of anything. So it makes me think there has to be some smoke. Ultimately, these deals are all complicated. Maybe they don't get made, but it's encouraging that he felt confident enough to say anything about it. And I guess we'll just go through
You'd have to think that, like, if it is an international move, that player or players are going to have not a lot of impact on Austin's run to the playoffs. Like, getting him into town, getting the visa, whatever. And so, like, I'm almost hoping that if there are moves, that it's like a move within the league so that they can integrate fairly quickly and actually start playing and help us make the playoffs. Because it's great if we bring in someone from abroad to come in, but like we have to make the playoffs in order for them to even get a chance to make a difference on this team. And if we have to wait that long, it might not be enough for us to make the playoffs.
Yeah, totally. That's true. What I was thinking is, other teams continue to make moves, and we saw lots of rumors over the last few days. So maybe, Austin's next move is some player from within the league who's a known that somebody else needs to move on to make a roster spot available, which I feel like would be probably the best thing for Austin this year, and then a good thing for like the other club long term is to make a move like that as opposed to somebody who's brand new to the league to introduce.
Yeah, that's a good point.
How about the upcoming schedule? So we'll get into this later, but Austin plays at Nashville on August 24th. Then Austin gets a first home match when what seems like forever now on August 31st. Both clubs haven't been eliminated from Leagues Cup, and I think I saw a Phil West article this week is almost everybody that Austin has to left play for this year has been eliminated from Leagues Cup, so there's not going to be a lot of other fatigue. Do we keep seeing rumors there's going to be a friendly at some point, maybe to just keep sharp? But have you seen anything about that?
No, no specifics, but I'm almost sure there will be. Like any team who's out at this point will want to do something to stay fresh and like keep their fitness. And so I'm sure there will be a game, whether that's it almost makes more sense for it to be an MLS team. I know they'll do USL teams or whatever, but USL's in the middle of their season too. And so you'd think it would be an MLS team, either Austin traveling somewhere or bringing someone in to their facility to play friendly.
Yeah. Another player news piece we got is Matthew Doyle put out his predictions for the MLS 22 under 22 this year. He has Owen in the 14th to 18th range. He was 18th on the final season list last year. I feel like he's due to move up. Like if the people who are making this list actually watch this sport in any detail and saw Owen Wolf of last year and Owen Wolf of this year, like I feel like he's made a big step forward. And if he doesn't finish a lot higher on the list, it's only because other players have also made the same kind of moves or other people have come in.
Yeah, I think on like his entire body of work this season that I don't know that he deserves to be a lot higher than what he is, but from what we've seen like the last 2 months or so out of him, like if he can continue that run, then I would not be shocked to see him end the season significantly higher on the list. All right. Anything else, or can we get into listener questions?
No, let's get into some listener questions. And we may not have time to get through all these from this week. We've got kind of a light week last week. So if you sent in a question on Patreon and we didn't get to yours, then we will do our best to get to it next week.
All right. Let's start with this one from Jeffrey and PJ. They ask, which player from the first 2 years not named Brad Stuver will be on the roster the longest?
Well, first of all, there are not a lot of options.
Yeah, who's even
for that player?
Who are we even picking from? I guess we've got Alex Ring, John Gallagher, Julio Cascante, Owen Wolf, Sebastian Driussi.
Hector Jimenez, technically.
Not him.
Yeah.
I mean, you could make an argument for John Gallagher just because he is under contract through 26 with an option for 27. And so that would put him at like 6 years if he sees out his whole contract. I think this is going to be a running theme, though. Like a lot of the people who are kind of poised to potentially have a long career with us are also people who have quite a bit of transfer value. And so I would put like Owen Wolf and Danny Pereira in that realm as well, where you could see like Danny's under contract. I guess he has options for another year. You could see them extending next season and giving him another 4 or 5 years and him seeing out that whole thing. Or you could see him getting sold next summer and never coming back. And the same for Owen. Like, is is Julio Cascante the more safe answer just because of the length of his contract and the lack of transfer value?
The fact that nobody else wants him. No, I'm just gonna go with the easy answer and say since Gallagher is the one that's under contract for the longest. And he's probably at the peak right now of his value to other teams because he's got some miles on him, right? He's not, so I could see like him being more valuable to Austin down the road than anybody else. Like Gallagher's my pick.
Yeah, and he's also, his salary is low enough that someone needs to throw like a pretty good chunk of money at you to make it worth your while to have a guy of this like talent level and flexibility level on that low of a money and that long of a contract. Like it's a smart type of player for an MLS team to keep a hold of. All right, let's move on to the next one. This is David Hubel. He asks, do you think we'll be starting over from scratch with our strikers in 2025? And if so, how would you go about rebuilding our striker core? I guess let's answer the first part. Are we going to be starting from scratch? Like meaning all new striker core? That feels unlikely to me.
No, because I feel like Diego Rubio is probably out. Like he started hot. He's tailed off. He's not seeing as many minutes, so I think he will be out. But Jesse Zardes is through contract through what, 25 at least?
Yeah, guaranteed through 25.
Guaranteed through 25. He's productive enough, and given the other holes on this team, I don't see how you unload him.
Yeah, I think he's hard to move, and
you're only buying him out. Like you're not moving him
right
in anything else. And like he's productive enough. I don't see how you buy him out. So I would say not completely. I think the rest of the show has indicated that we would love to see another number 9, like DP number 9 come in, and there will be the flexibility at the end of this year that can happen. That's where I would go. I think it's the biggest need that this team has.
Yeah, I think so. Like that, I could see it going other directions, and I don't think they would necessarily be wrong, but we need someone who can reliably be goal dangerous. And whether that be from like a winger or like an attacking midfielder, sure, that would be great. But I feel like the most obvious place to do it would be like with the pieces we have around it, the most obvious place to use a third DP spot would be at the 9.
Well, I'm going to go to this next one. Keith Simon. At the end of this season, which players do you think we will have to say goodbye to? And let's just run through the people who are guaranteed through 2024. And we'll say, like, I'll just read through the list and we'll talk about who like we think might still be around. How about we do it that way? So,
yeah.
It's Ethan Finley, Matt Hedges, Brendan Hines-Ike, Hunter Obrion, Denny Pereira, Alex Ring, Dio Rubio, Johan Valencia. All these players have at least one club option for 2025. So which of those players do you see Austin picking up?
Yeah, and so like the club option is important because like that essentially means if Austin wants to keep them, they absolutely can. And so I'd say I think Finley's done. I think the only way you keep him is if he agrees to go onto a supplemental deal. And I kind of think he could probably get a non-supplemental deal somewhere. So I figure he'll be gone. Matt Hedges is almost certainly gone. Brendan Hines-Ike is one that is interesting. I think it kind of depends. So we do have an option on Hines-Ike?
Yes. Well, it's off the roster page for AustinFC.com. So trusting that's accurate.
Yeah.
So 2025 option.
I think it probably depends on how much that option year was for, because he is on quite low money, if my memory is correct. And so maybe part of his agreement to take a low salary this year was give me a bigger option year. And if you pick me up, it's guaranteed to give a pretty big boost. So I think it's going to depend on like what the salary is written in that option year. If it's quite high, maybe they'll let him walk and take their chances on bringing someone else. If it's fairly low or like close to what he's on now, I think he's a pretty clear option to pick up.
I don't disagree with that. Next, Hunter Obrion. This feels like one that's dependent upon like what Austin feels they can do with the rest of the roster. Like he's a decent piece, but there are better options out there in the world. Danny Pereira, one would have to believe if the option's up to Austin FC, Danny comes back.
100% they're taking that. Even if
Yeah.
the plan is to move him, you do not let him walk for free. And so you take that player option immediately, and then probably if they're not already working on a renewal, like you start doing it this offseason after picking up that club option. You have to lock down Danny Pereira for at least another handful of years.
Yeah, I think Ring and Rubio, I feel like if the club has a choice with Ring, which we know they didn't last year, and then with Rubio, like those seem like players that are easy to let walk, which makes me think like that brings us to Johan Valencia. So like, do you pick up Johan Valencia's option knowing he's on a TAM deal?
I would say no,
elsewhere?
just because of his salary. Like if he were on half the money, I'd say, yeah, absolutely. He's a great guy to be able to throw in to the game in certain game states or certain situations. But because his salary is so high, I almost think you have to let him walk or try to renegotiate. Same with Ring. Like, I think it depends on what Ring wants his last year or two playing to look like. If he is happy to kind of like stay in one spot, call Austin home for the rest of his career, and then be able to go off and do whatever he wants, maybe he's willing to take a pay cut, and like we don't pick up the option, renegotiate a much lower salary that makes sense for Austin, and he gets to stay put. But if he's trying to get one big last payday, and power to him, if that's what he wants to do, go get your money, Alex. I fully support that. I want it to be somewhere else. I do not want to pay Alex Ring a significant amount of money to stay here.
I agree with you on that, and I just feel like Alex Ring does not seem like the kind of guy, and to your point, no fault to him, that is going to like take a hometown deal anywhere. You know, I feel like he's like, because we remember way back when Adrian Healy interviewed him on the Was It Verde and Black podcast, and he talked about all the things he had sacrificed and given up to like build this soccer career. Like I feel like that's a guy that's just going to maximize the money he makes from it to maximize what he's gotten out of like what he's given 32 years, whatever his life to do. So I would expect to see him to chase whatever he can make the most and not come back. So let's.
I think outside of that, like there's probably going to be some guys who are not out of contract gone as well. I think that's more of a crapshoot. I think that's what the market is willing to take off of our hands, essentially. And so I think there could be quite a few others gone as well, but it's hard to say who they're going to be.
Yeah, right. Without knowing that particular player situations demand anything like that, that's a lot. That is a lot harder. So let's go to Tom Halleck. Where do you see Alonso Ramirez after this season?
I want to say first, so I was watching water polo the other day, and there was like one of the veterans on the water polo team with the last name Halleck. I was like, oh, that's not a very common name. I wonder if he's related to Tom. And then I see Tom posts on Instagram, congrats to my cousin Ben for getting bronze in the water polo. I was like, oh, they actually are related. That's why.
Oh my God. I missed that. I saw that name, but yeah, I didn't even look up that connection.
Yeah. Okay. Alonso Ramirez. I mean, Alonso, he played a couple of MLS games and showed fairly well. I feel like unless he's able to get a green card and therefore no longer take up an international roster spot, I think he is not in Austin next year and probably playing in USL.
Yeah,
if he could get a green card, throw that guy a supplemental roster spot 100%. But it's not worth the international spot, and so I kind of think he's done after this year.
Yeah, with what you're seeing for him, that makes total sense. So people were sad about the Austin roster, the Austin FC first team roster. Having no players left on it. Like Austin FC 2 is probably headed that way. Basically at the same time, where like it's just. That's the nature of that league. And so he seems like a guy that may very well move on. Sean Collins has a question that we debated the meaning of. And so we'll just get into it live. So is this season more like an episode of Seinfeld or an episode of Arrested Development? And I'll start with my take on this question. Is that I feel like episodes of Seinfeld, things happen for 30 minutes and people leave it no differently than they were before. And there's not like a linear plot line of development. And Arrested Development is where, like, over time, you see people grow. I don't know about grow. You see people change, and you see situations change. And so, to me, the question is, like, does every match stand alone, or are we learning from learning from every season. Sorry, standalone. We like learning from this to get different, and so I feel like every season has been completely unique. And I would say it's more like Seinfeld. You have a different take, I think.
Well, yeah, I was trying to think of like what is the difference in the similarities between these two shows, and one of the through lines of these two shows is that most people in the shows, like the characters, are bad people, and it's like funny to watch them fail. And I think the difference is in Arrested Development, you actually do have there's like two characters through most of the show that are like supposed to be the good guys, and it's Michael and George Michael are supposed to be the good guys that give you a little bit of hope. You think that maybe they're going to pull out of it, they're going to turn the company around, they're going to save the family. And so I'm going to hope that it's more of an Arrested Development, but with a different ending than Arrested Development, where they actually do save the family and turn things around.
They do. I like that take. ATX Barcap Lover 69, 420 always comes up with these questions that are like specific enough to be interesting and open-ended enough that I don't really know what they're digging for, which I appreciate. That's a good question.
Sometimes that are asking us to do way more research than I want to do for a show, for a question that's not about soccer. This one is actually quite simple, which I appreciate. ATX Barcamp Lover 69, 420.
Okay, so if you could commit any one crime and be sure you could get away with it, what would it be?
This one's easy for me. I'd steal a lot of money from a very rich, bad person. I'm sure you can all think of one. I'm sure you can all think of many that I would take a substantial chunk of their money and keep it for myself. And they're a bad person, so they deserve it. They're not going to miss it really, and it's not really hurting anybody else. So I think that's where I would go.
Well, I have almost the same answer. Except I feel like somehow you have a better crime, like a more just crime answer. It's a very much more Robin Hood-y crime answer, where mine was like, what is the most corrupt institution that I can think of? And like, can I steal all the money from that institution?
Are you going to put your neck out and name names here?
No, I'm not going to name the specific institution. But
hold on, you can say it and I'll can censor it.
Well, yeah, clearly it's I'm just saying, like, I was looking for a faceless crime. You're like, I want to like make a crime that enriches me and also makes a terrible person lesser. And I was just trying to like find, somebody who could like handle how much ever money I wanted to take. So it's all good. All right, let's do a soccer question, and then we're going to end this with a question from your mom, which I feel like is the best way to end a show.
All right, next one is from Mark Stein. They ask, can you update us on how Damian Loss has been doing this year? Is he on track to be an MLS keeper next season? Should someone want to trade for him or Stuver? Or if Stuver is unavailable for some reason? So Damian Loss is currently the leader in starts and minutes for Louisville City. So he's getting a lot of games in under his belt, which is exactly what this loan was for, right? Like MLS Next Pro is not good enough for him. MLS was maybe a bridge too far for him, but he needed to be playing. And so going to USL was the right move. Louisville City is, I don't think many people would argue that they're the best team in USL at the moment. And so like, it's arguable to say like, is that the best place for a goalkeeper to develop, where you're not always facing as many shots as you need to, or getting like tested as much as you need to? But you could also argue that like, okay, the expectations are high, the level of play is high, and he's getting to train with really good teammates. So I don't know what the answer is there. I've watched a few games of him, but then I also am kept up to date by Trevor Allison, who watches almost every Louisville City game, it seems, and will give updates at times. So according to Trevor, that Damian is doing pretty well in USL, but USL is probably still his level at the moment. And so like, he's still just 22. That's young for a goalkeeper. So he is on a good path, but not to the level that he's going to force a Stuver trade anytime soon. So I would expect another year in USL from him. Maybe we see him come back and be the backup for Stuver and play in other competitions, but I would guess you want to keep him playing as much as he has been. So I wouldn't be surprised if he stayed at Louisville or found another home in USL next year.
All right, Landon. It's a question from Cindy Cottom, which I wanted to ask a personal question, but it's fine. It's actually a soccer question, which is good. I'm still going to ask it to you. Would you rather see Austin press less and pack the defense and try to play transition, or press the entire field and play conservatively from the back, which is actually your dad's question? But I guess your mom's the one on Patreon. Is that the difference?
Yeah, she runs the Patreon account, so she had to type it in for him. Do you have an answer to this, Jeremiah?
No, I want to let you answer first.
I think what I want to see, as like someone whose first love was like the 2009-2010 Barcelona team, I want to see him play with the ball and like do fun stuff with the ball. But I also I think we had a segment on the show a while back about like what wolf ball, like quote unquote wolf ball, is and what it isn't. Like kind of where I landed for an answer on that was wolf ball. Like maybe the definition of wolf ball should be trying to do too much with too little. And so maybe at this point in time, or for like maybe the last 4 years, it would have been smarter to do a more practical, functional way of playing with the players we had on the team. But ideally, and where I think we're going and think we could actually do successfully a year from now, is playing with the ball and having the horses to do it well.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add is just being situations where depending upon what your opponent's going to do, and I would go back to 2021 maybe when Austin didn't have the talent, and Josh Wolf's like, "Oh, we're just gonna how are we gonna do against this team? How are you gonna do against Seattle?" And it's like, we're just gonna play our style. Like it doesn't matter who the opponent is, we're gonna play the way we want to play. And I just I hope, and I kind of think maybe now over time we've learned there's the base things that you're gonna do don't change, but you also have to be flexible to what your opponent's going to do and take advantage of the way that they play and the way you can react to it. I feel like it's a little bit of what LA did was took advantage of the way Austin was playing, used their advantage. Then I hope that Austin will have the talent and the coaching wherewithal to turn it around in the future and be able to do that. We're this is the way we want to play, but for opponents shutting us off, then we're going to we have the players and the ability to make the adjustments to do what's going to lead the best possible outcome and not be dogmatic about it.
Yeah, 100%. So are we going to save the rest of these for next week?
Yeah, let's hit the rest for next week because we got a couple questions that have multiple parts and they deserve more time than we probably have tonight, and we'll have more time next week because we don't have a game review.
Yeah, and we can, if any Patreon subscribers are listening and you missed the call for questions, go onto the thread that we posted and post some more questions, and maybe we'll answer those next week as well. But we're also going to have, maybe we can talk about this off air, but we're going to have a guest next week, and it's David Goss, formerly of Extra Time, currently of Soccer Wise, the new podcast he started with Tom Bogert and Jordan Angeli. So super excited about that. I've been a big David Goss fan for a long time. And so really excited to kind of get his take on Austin FC and a few other topics we have in mind. But we'll do that and then answer some questions. And then are we previewing a game next week as well?
We do, because we'll have the Nashville game will happen after next week and before we record again.
That's right. All right. Well, before we finish, we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Come find us on Twitter at LVHero87 and JBentley_ATX, and then at Moon Tower Soccer on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Sign up for the Patreon, and you can get some cool stuff and then make us answer serious or silly questions. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with a preview of the Nashville game. We'll talk to David Goss and answer some more listener questions. Until then, I'm Lane Cottam.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Thank for nothing, you never.
La gente.
Oh my God.